Australia will perform much better with a carbon tax, says former Treasury boss and outgoing NAB chair Ken Henry. A new report from the CSIRO, which Dr Henry helped write, says Australia is at a crossroads, with one path leading to a slow and painful decline. The other is paved with prosperity, but only if we act now. 50 business and community leaders helped compile the report that calls for significant changes in climate, planning and economic policies. Dr Henry says we should question whether now is the time to pursue a budget surplus. Ken Henry, this report has some good targets in it for, say, 2020, but not for 40 years away. A lot of them you'd look at and say they're fairly unambitious.
Oh, do you think so?
I think so.
Well, they're not really targets, okay? What the report seeks to do is to chart a course for Australia's future over several decades, so out to 2060. They're really scenarios, and we've only in the report produced two scenarios. One is what we've called a slow decline scenario, and that's more or less how we would imagine that Australia would evolve over the next 4 decades on a pretty much business as usual basis. And we frankly don't think that's good enough. The 50 people who participated in this project, leaders across corporate Australia, community sectors, in academia and so on, we just thought that was not sufficiently ambitious, and so we've charted a future vision for Australia out over 40 years. We could do better than that future vision, but it's quite a challenging future vision, I think.
You said today that this report challenges National Australia Bank, which you're chairman. In what way?
It challenges us, all of us who are leaders of business in the community sector or in academia. It challenges everybody really who's in a leadership position to see what their organisations can do individually or collectively to help put us on that better path. It is quite challenging. But we in National Australia Bank have been thinking about this for some time, and over the next few days and weeks you will see announcements from National Australia Bank about how we are going to make a contribution to Australia's future, putting us on that better future path.
A leading climate scientist told me today that we're looking at major catastrophe, not a slow decline, if we only reach 11% emissions reduction by 2060, as outlined in this report.
Well, this is for Australia. So for the world, of course, the challenge is to keep climate change within 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And Australia has an important contribution to that, and we could show, and it's quite within our ability to demonstrate leadership globally in how to meet that challenge.
But are we being honest with ourselves if we say the slow decline scenario, we'll still have pretty good growth? It's 2.1% is the slow decline scenario.
Yeah.
We'll still have an increase in wages. We'll still have low unemployment. We'll have falling energy prices. If we don't change path and if we just sort of drift along with this, are we being honest?
Being honest, it's not good enough. That's the point. The point is that that's not good enough. And we do need to have an honest conversation, and that's really what this report is about, a conversation that is honest, that's well informed, respectful, polite, that recognises what Australia's future really will look like over the next few decades, unless we change the way that we do things, unless leaders in particular change the way that they think about their leadership responsibilities, the things for which they are accountable.
Much was made of the new opportunities for Australia in this report, one of which, and we've talked about this at a national level before, is new energy exports and looking at the hydrogen industry, that this could be a major gift to the world from Australia, emissions-free energy. But the report says this all hinges on a carbon price.
Sure.
Is this something that needs to come back into the national debate?
Look, at some stage, of course, it will come back into the national debate.
What makes you so sure? I mean, it's been political poison for so many leaders.
Oh, believe me, I understand. I've had an association with policy in this area for a very long time. going back at least 15 years.
So what makes you so sure that someone would be brave enough to bring it back?
The thing is, and the report sets this out, Australia's energy transition is going to happen anyway. Almost no matter what the policy framework is, decisions taken by business leaders today will ensure that by about mid-century, Australia's electricity sector will be 100% renewables. That's almost irrespective of what decisions are taken at a policy level. And that's because leaders of businesses in the energy sector are having to take investment decisions on behalf of their shareholders right now. And the shareholders obviously don't want to see stranded assets, but the shareholders also expect those business leaders to be operating in the best interests of the community. So that will happen. As it happens, I think the intensity of the political debate about the best way of achieving emissions reduction, the intensity of that debate will wane. It's easy to get exercised about these things now, and of course politicians have been quite exercised about these things in recent years. It wasn't always the case. Back in 2007 it was not the case at all. It was not a matter of political debate at all how Australia should do this. And what I'm saying to you is that I think over the next several years we will get to that point again.
So can we do it without a carbon price, or do we need a carbon price?
We will do it whether we have a carbon price or not, but we would do it better with a price on carbon.
CSIRO and the many people that have been involved in this report said there's a strong sense that Australia needs to take action now to ensure our future prosperity. But what is the impetus for change? Because the slow decline scenario gives us 2.1% growth, wages rising, unemployment remaining low. Why change? What's the urgency?
Yeah, so in the slow decline, Australia does continue to grow. Wages, real wages do continue to grow, but at rates for which Australians are not accustomed. It's slower growth than what we've been used to in the past, with dwindling set of opportunities for our children and our grandchildren. And yet, what Australia offers, or could offer, for its children and for its grandchildren, is the highest living standards of any country on earth. Better opportunities for our children, better opportunities for our grandchildren than the opportunities that we have today. In slow decline, no, the opportunities, there will still be growth, but the opportunities available there for our grandchildren will be less than the opportunities that we baby boomers have had and that we've taken advantage of. It is possible, and this is what the report sets out, it is possible for this generation of leaders to give their grandchildren and great-grandchildren at least as good a set of opportunities as they themselves have enjoyed.
Australians have just indicated at the polls that they're not really willing to accept major reform ideas, whether you agree with them or not. They were wholeheartedly rejected. Do you think that the electorate, that the Australian people have an appetite for significant changes, or is this going to have to be very incremental?
Let's see. I mean, the report sets out a challenge to leaders in business, in the not-for-profit sector, in academia, a challenge to explain to Australians what our future pathways might be. It's up to us as leaders to provide a sufficiently compelling story about Australia's future that it motivates action. Motivates action on our part, but also motivates action in the policy space. Maybe not immediately, but over time. And I do think, and again, we've been in this place previously, and I remember it well, where it was certainly possible to get broad-based community support for policy change which today would be seen by just about everybody as simply impossible. You wouldn't bother to talk about it today. But in the 1980s and the 1990s, the policy change that occurred in Australia was quite transformative, and it occurred with fairly broad-based community support. That can happen again.
On the business program in the lead up to the election, we were very hard pressed to find any business leader who would come on the program and actually discuss the policies that were being put forth at the election to tell both their employees and the electorate what their view on what effect the policies would have.
Sure.
How...
The discussion starts at the wrong point, you see. The discussion should start at the point of challenges and a vision for the nation's future. That's where the conversation should start. And business leaders would be more comfortable in that space. As soon as you bring it down to a policy or a specific set of policies, you're engaging in what is a political debate. And that is, of course, difficult territory for business leaders. What I'm saying is if we can have a discussion about the challenges and opportunities facing the country, and we can agree on a vision for the nation's future, then we can have a much more honest and constructive discussion about the set of policies that we should pursue in order to realise that vision.
Each chapter of the report mentions research and development, skills training, the need for infrastructure, that's all required spending, and you know, spending from the government really. But can we achieve that in the size that we need if we've got a government that's hog-tied and focused on surpluses? And I'm not talking specifically this government, all governments.
It's all about choices. Obviously I believe we can. I do believe that it is possible to set government policy in a way that is supportive of productivity enhancement, and that's really what we're talking about there, productivity enhancement over time and in a way that delivers a sustainable budget. I do believe that, and certainly there are ways of doing it. Now maybe our present tax system is not sufficiently robust to be able to do it, and maybe we should be having a discussion about the structure of our taxation system that would support that level of government investment in the nation's future.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I produced a report on it about 10 years ago, or led a team that produced a report on it about 10 years ago.
Because we currently have a very big argument about taxes right now, so I'm just wondering if you're willing to wade into that.
No, I'm not, except to say that we're having a big argument about a very small part of the tax system. And the tax review that I had the opportunity to lead about 10 years ago, you know, that was a comprehensive review of the Australian tax system and also the transfer payment system, both Commonwealth and at state level. That's the sort of debate we could benefit from having at the moment, but that's just part of the picture.
But what about the surplus at the moment? Like, do we need to keep focusing on surpluses? Is that what we need?
We do need to have sustainable public finances. There's no escaping that. We've got to have sustainable public finances. You know, in going through the global financial crisis, that was the best asset this country had, was the fact that we started from a very strong fiscal position with negative net public debt. It was a hellishly important asset to have at that time. And we can't lose sight of the need to have sustainable public finances. But we do have choices. And in particular, we have choices about when the budget needs to be returned to surplus, and we have choices about how that should be achieved.
I have to ask you, when it comes to monetary policy, we are entering into uncharted waters now. Do you think the Reserve Bank is going to have to go into areas of QE because interest rates are running out?
Sure. I was on the board of the Reserve Bank for 10 years, as you know. I don't want to make their life more difficult by prejudging things that they might or might not do. That's not helpful to any of us. All I would say about that is that the signals coming from the Governor of the Reserve Bank are firstly that he understands the situation. That's important, and obviously he does. And secondly, he's prepared to do things that might be unusual. He's demonstrating a preparedness to consider what it might require in terms of monetary policy, and that's all I'd be prepared to say about it.
How serious do you think the situation is that's facing the economy?
Oh well, there's no doubt growth has stalled, or at least slowed appreciably. There can be no doubt about that. Business investment in particular is very weak. Business investment as a proportion of GDP, we haven't seen ratios this low since the recession of the early 1990s. That's obviously an issue, and that's having an impact on productivity. It's not the only factor having an impact on productivity, but it's obviously very concerning. Household indebtedness is high, and wages growth has been very low for some period, and that's had quite a dampening impact on household consumption activity in particular. And then we've had quite significant gyration in housing prices, which has made the task even more complex. So there are big issues there, there's no doubt about that, but these are issues that are not beyond the capability of the Reserve Bank to manage.
Just one more. This 2060 report, you've spoken, it's all about leaders in the community and particularly in business getting out there and talking about what Australia needs to do in order to ensure prosperity.
Yeah.
Why should they listen? Why should Australians listen to business leaders when you've so wholeheartedly let them down so many times?
Well, look, it is true that business has let people down in some areas. My decision earlier this year to step down from chairing National Australia Bank was my way of saying, and of course the Chief Executive at the time, Andrew Thorburn, as well stepped down, and it was our way of saying collectively that we take accountability for NAB's failings. And those failings go back some years, and they go to the way in which NAB has treated its customers. Simply not good enough. And so our decisions, difficult as they were taken in order to demonstrate that we understand the accountability that rests on our shoulders, and we did not deliver. There are, but you know, in failing to deliver, we failed to satisfy community expectations. And those expectations are quite legitimate. We understand them and we respect them. They're quite legitimate. Community expects a lot of business leaders. There's an opportunity for business leaders to say, we understand what the community expects of us and we are going to deliver with respect to the treatment of customers, but also with respect to the environment, communities, and the future of the nation.
Ken Henry, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.